Hello, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. In today's webinar, we'll be taking all the key highlights of the new foreign trade policy 2023, in which we'll be also discussing the various changes which they've made in the schemes which they have continued in the new foreign trade policy, while comparing it with the changes which they've proposed in the new foreign trade policy. We'll also be discussing towards the end all the changes, recent changes which have been made in the customs law, including the changes in the custom warehousing provisions, the electronic cash ledger, which has been implemented and notified from 1st April 2023. And towards the end, we'll also be taking questions and all. In fact, Mr. Jain has also joined us. He will also be participating during the question and answer session. So I hope you will all have a fruitful and a knowledgeable session today. So let's start with the key highlights of the new foreign trade policy. As you can see on the screen before you, we have jotted down all the key highlights. So first thing first, that there have been no new fiscal incentives which have been introduced in this year's policy, even though this new policy has been introduced after a long gap of 8 years. And it was widely anticipated in the trade and industry that some new fiscal incentives will be made available, especially for the service exporters who are making the export of services outside India, since the SEIS was discontinued from April 2020 onwards. So a lot of service exporters especially were hoping that some sort of a new scheme will be made available to them. But unfortunately, in the new foreign trade policy, they have not come up with any new fiscal incentives. Mostly the incentives which were there under the earlier foreign trade policy have been continued, and some have been discontinued, which we'll discuss in detail. But more or less, it's a recap of the already existing foreign trade policy. Now, as far as this foreign trade policy is concerned, more focus has been given on facilitation measures which they feel will eventually boost exports from India. And these facilitation measures are in the nature of recognizing several districts as export hubs, adding more towns as towns of excellence, undertaking measures for the purposes of internationalization of Indian currency, boosting mercantile trade activities from India, and also boosting e-commerce exports from India. So for all these purposes, they have undertaken facilitation measures. And in fact, if any of you would have gone through the speech made by the Honorable Commerce and Industry Minister and also by the DGFT officials, when the new foreign trade policy was being unveiled, they had clearly indicated that now the intention of the government going ahead will be to provide more focused to the facilitation measures, and less fiscal incentives will be made available. In the sense that clarified very clearly that going ahead, they want to move away from the regime of providing subsidies to the exporters to put in place certain mechanisms which facilitate export on an overall basis. And idea behind that, to my understanding, was also that a few years back, the existing subsidies at that point of time, MEIS, SEIS, EOU, EPCG, they were all challenged by the US government before the WTO, as these schemes as per US were in violation of the agreement on subsidies, of which India is also a signatory. So considering that, and also the fact that India had received an unfavorable ruling at the first stage, which even though has been challenged, but still the idea was that all these subsidies which have been provided, or all these fiscal incentives have been provided, are not in compliance with the WTO guidelines. So therefore, in terms of formulating and notifying this new foreign trade policy, the dilemma before the Commerce Ministry was to balance not just the expectation of the exporters, but also to remain compliant with the WTO guidelines, WTO stipulations. So considering that, they have not come up with any new fiscal incentives, and focus has been to boost export by way of giving facilitation measures under the new foreign trade policy. Now, as you can see, we have jotted down all the fiscal incentive schemes which have been continued in the new foreign trade policy from the erstwhile foreign trade policy of 1520. What they have continued includes the road tap scheme, ROSCTL scheme, which basically provides the benefit of duty credit scrip on export of goods outside India. They have continued the advance authorization and DFIA scheme, which allows duty-free import of input by an exporter. Then they have continued the EPCG scheme, which allows duty-free import of capital goods. Especially EPCG is to be noted because a lot of news reports, news portals were reporting that maybe in the new foreign trade policy, EPCG will be discontinued. But they have not discontinued EPCG scheme, and they have rather continued with the EPCG scheme. Plus, EOU and deemed export have also been continued. So more or less, if you will see, that broad parameters or the scope of all these schemes have remained intact. They have made some changes which we'll be discussing in the following slides, but more or less everything remains same on paper as far as the fundamental aspects of these schemes are concerned. Some changes which we will discuss in the following slides. Now, coming on to schemes which have been discontinued. As you can see, 4 schemes have been discontinued in the new foreign trade policy that has been scrapped when compared with the last year's policy. The first is post-EPCG scheme. Now, this post-EPCG scheme to begin with did not have many takers. There were very few exporters who had eventually opted for post-EPCG scheme. In fact, those who had opted also were unable to get any benefit from the DGFT officials on account of certain internal issues being faced by the DGFT office in this regard. Many of them had to eventually approach High Court to get DGFT office to get these duty credit scripts issued to them. In fact, we had also successfully represented a couple of exporters in this regard before the High Court, and thereafter after High Court's interference, the post-EPCG duty credit scripts were issued. So considering the fact that there are very few exporters who had opted for this and the issues being faced by the DGFT office as far as post-EPCG scheme is concerned, under the new foreign trade policy, they have discontinued the scheme altogether. So going ahead, this benefit will not be available. As far as exporters who had already opted for this and they have got the duty credit scripts or they are in the process of getting the duty credit script, the benefit will be available to them, but no new exporter will be eligible to opt for post-EPCG scheme going ahead. Then they have discontinued the MEIS scheme also, which was benefit of duty credit script to exporter of goods outside India. This has been discontinued to, this has been scrapped to avoid any sort of confusion, because this in any case was replaced with the road tap scheme from January 21 onwards. So therefore, so as to avoid any sort of confusion in the mind of the exporter, they have scrapped it from the FTP itself, and going ahead, all the exporter of goods will be entitled to the benefit of road tap scheme, except the ineligible categories. Then service export from India scheme, SEIS scheme, which provided benefit of duty credit script to service exporter. SEIS has also been discontinued, even though the benefit was not being made available from April 2020 onwards, but it still remained in the foreign trade policy. And like I said in the beginning, it was hoped by the service exporters that some sort of a benefit will be extended to service exporters. But unfortunately, they have not given any new fiscal incentive as far as the service exporters are concerned. Maybe in near future, they may come up with a different scheme. But right now, under the new foreign trade policy, there is no benefit, no fiscal incentive for the service exporter from India. Lastly, ROSL, which is a refund of state levy, which has also been discontinued from March 2019 onwards and was replaced with the ROSCTL scheme. So again, to remove any sort of confusion, they have removed ROSL also. So I'll just reiterate that schemes which have been discontinued include post-EPCG, MEIS, SEIS, and ROSL. And the schemes which they have continued from the earlier foreign trade policy are road tap, ROSCTL, advance authorization, DFIA, EPCG, EOU, and deemed export scheme. So these have been continued, and there is no other new scheme which they have floated. Another interesting and key highlight of this new foreign trade policy is they have also come up with an amnesty scheme, which is basically a settlement scheme for the purposes of settling pending advance authorization and EPCG authorizations where the exporter is unable to fulfill his export obligation due to any reason. Now, in the coming slide, we'll discuss this amnesty scheme in detail, but on the face of it, I can say that this will be of interest to a lot of exporters, and this certainly is a very prudent decision which has been taken by the government to close all the pending EPCG and advance authorization matters. Lastly, they have deviated from their earlier policy of having a foreign trade policy with an end date of 5 years. From this time onwards, they have stated very clearly that this foreign trade policy will not have an end date, and this will be in vogue till the time it is replaced or replaced or scrapped with a new scheme altogether. So the idea is, as was indicated in the speech given by the DGFT officials at the time of unveiling the new foreign trade policy, that they want to keep this foreign trade policy as dynamic as possible, something which can be changed as and when the need arises rather than waiting for a period of 5 years. Only time will tell whether actually they implement the changes as and when it is required, or they will continue to wait for a long period of time to implement changes. But yes, on the face of it, they have said that this will not be limited to a period of 5 years. This will be in place till the time it is replaced or scrapped altogether. Then let's have a look at the changes which they have made in the erstwhile foreign trade policy and the schemes which they have continued in this year's foreign trade policy. Firstly, status holder recognition certificate. Now, again, there are no new fiscal incentives or benefits which have been extended to the status holder category. The change is limited to reduction in level of export performance, which is required for recognition as a status holder. So earlier, many of you will know that if you cross a certain threshold of exports, you were eligible to take certification as a status holder from the DGFT officials under the foreign trade policy. Getting recognition as a status holder made the exporter eligible to avail certain benefits, such as the fact that they were not required to execute any bank guarantee for the purposes of availing any of the schemes of the foreign trade policy. They could self-certify the goods as originating in India. The faster clearances were being made available, and several such other facilitative benefits were being made available to a status holder. Now, these same benefits have been continued in the new foreign trade policy, but the threshold level or the level of export performance which is required for getting recognition as a status holder has been reduced substantially. So as you can see in the table before you, there is no change in the threshold for 1 star, but for all the remaining star categories, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star, they have made substantial reduction. As you can see, for 2 star, they have reduced it from 25 million USD to 15. For 3 star, it has been reduced from 100 to 50. For 4, it has been reduced from 500 to 200. And for 5 star, it has been reduced from 2,000 to 800. So substantial reduction has been made. Now, one thing I would like to clarify here is that as to how it is to be calculated. So it has to be calculated in the manner that if today I am making an application for getting recognition as a status holder, I am required to take into account export made by me in the current financial year and export made by me in the preceding 3 financial years. So export made by me in all 4 years put together, if they cross any of these thresholds, then I'm eligible to take recognition as a status holder. So again, I'll reiterate in a simpler words, I'm required to take all exports made by me, physical export, deemed export, be it export of SCOMET items also, whatever export I made in the current year and preceding 3 financial year, all put together, whether they cross any of the threshold or not. If they cross, say for example, or if put together in all 4 years, if I cross a threshold of say 15 million USD, then I'm eligible to get recognition as a 2-star category status holder. So the same formula is to be adopted, just that the level of entry or the level of export performance which is required, that has been reduced substantially. And the idea is very clear that they want more and more exporters to get themselves recognized as a status holder, so that they can get themselves a recognition under the foreign trade policy, which they can showcase as at the international stage, and also so that more and more exporters are eligible to take benefits which are otherwise available to a status holder. So the idea is very clear. Now, apart from this, there are 3 very crucial things which we have highlighted, which should be kept note of. Firstly, under the new foreign trade policy, export performance is required in all 3 preceding financial years. So meaning thereby there has to be some level of export in the last 3 years, or in all last 3 years. If there is even one single year in which I have not made any export, even though I may qualify, I may cross this threshold level, but still I will not be eligible to take recognition as a status holder. So this is very important, because in the earlier policy, out of all the 4 years for which I am required to keep export, I was required to have export in minimum of two financial years. That earlier export performance was required in at least 2 out of 4 years. Now they've said that in all 3 preceding years, I need to have some export. So this is a very important change which should be kept note of. Then all existing status holder certificate issued under the erstwhile foreign trade policy 1520 will be valid only till 30th September 2023. Meaning thereby all the exporters who right now have a status holder certificate issued to them under the erstwhile foreign trade policy, the last foreign trade policy 1520, those certificates will be valid only till 30th September 2023, even though that certificate may have been issued to them in the month of February this year itself. As long as the certificates were issued to them in the previous foreign trade policy, they will be valid only till 30th September 2023. If you want to continue to avail the benefit under the new foreign trade policy, you need to get a fresh certificate by making a fresh application under the new foreign trade policy. So this has to be kept in mind, especially by all those exporters who currently are status holders, and also by people who want to avail a fresh certificate considering the revised and lower export performance which has been fixed under the new foreign trade policy. Lastly, they have issued, they have provided that this status holder certificate will be valid for a period of 5 years. So this is the validity period which they have specified for the status holder certificates to be issued under the new foreign trade policy. If you have any questions, you can write it in the chat box, and we'll try and answer it if possible right now. Then there are certain measures which have been introduced for the purposes of promoting ease of doing business. Several measures rather they've taken under the new foreign trade policy. First measure which they've taken is that they've reduced considerably the composition fee which is required to be paid for obtaining extension in export obligation period under the advance authorization scheme. So considerable reduction has been provided. As you can see in the table before you, for getting first extension in export obligation period under the advance authorization scheme, right now you are required to pay a hefty composition fee to the tune of 0.5% of the shortfall. That now has been reduced considerably to 5,000, 10,000 or 15,000 depending upon the CIF value of license for which you are seeking an extension. So definitely a very prudent decision taken by the government. This will help a lot of exporters at time when they are unable to fulfill their export obligation and they have to take extension from the DGFT office. So this certainly is a step in the right direction and will assist and help a lot of trade and industry, especially at times when they are unable to fulfill the export obligation due to any reason. Then In terms of getting a second extension, right now you are required to pay 0.5% per month, which again was very hefty at times. That has been reduced to a fixed fee of 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 as the case may be. Equally, for advance authorizations having pre-import conditions, right now you're required to pay 0.5% or 1% per month, which has again been reduced to 5,000, 10,000 and 15,000. So a very noble gesture from the government by reducing fee which was unnecessarily required to be paid, especially when times were hard for the exporters. Like during the COVID period, many people were unable to fulfill their export obligation and they ended up paying very high amount of composition fee. So now by this reduction of fee, this will help a lot of exporters in my opinion. Then another measure which they have taken is they have reduced this benefit. Minded the earlier benefit was available to all exporters. This benefit which is before you is applicable only in case of MSME exporters. So this benefit or measure is limited only to MSME exporter, not to other exporters. So for this, the measure is that the application fee which is required to be paid to the DGFT office for getting an advance authorization and EPCG license has been reduced considerably. So for licenses up to 1 crore, they have to pay a mere fixed fee of 100 rupees. And for licenses above 1 crore, they have to pay a fixed fee of 5,000 rupees. So again, a very prudent decision by the government. This will allow more and more MSME exporters to avail the benefit of advance authorization and EPCG without having to pay much application fee to the government. Then another measure which they've introduced is that they have put in place automatic approval systems for issuance of advance authorization, EPCG, revalidation of these licenses, extension and export obligation for these. So the idea as to how exactly it is going to be implemented, they have not put it in public domain. But the idea is they want to automate the system to such an extent that as soon as you file an online application for any of these activities, the system itself will process your application and give you the intended benefit within a day's time. So the idea is to promote ease of doing business, reduce the lead time which is required right now. As you can see in the table before you, for getting advance authorization EPCG, you have the time taken is 3 to 7 days, which will be reduced to 1 day. Then for revalidation and extension in export obligation period, the time taken right now is anywhere between 3 days to 1 month. That has been sought to be reduced to 1 day. So the idea is as soon as you make an application, the system itself will process your application and give you the intended benefit within a day's time without any involvement by the DGFT office. Certainly, this will be based on certain risk parameters which the DGFT office will identify and inbuilt in the system itself. Now, as to, like I said, how it is going to be implemented, that only maybe in some time they will release some policy document to that effect. But the idea is noble, that is very prudent. And my take of it is that this will be akin to the self-assessment system of customs, wherein as soon as you file the bill of entry, the system itself verifies whatever you have filed and issues an out-of-charge order to you without there any involvement of the customs official. So equally, once this automatic approval system is implemented by DGFT, your applications will approve automatically without any involvement by the DGFT officials. Again, subject to the fact that your application has been filed properly and all these risk parameters of the DGFT officials, DGFT systems are satisfied. So again, a very, very prudent decision by the government in this regard. Now let's have a look at certain key changes which they made in the advance authorization scheme. So firstly, the benefit of obtaining advance authorization on self-ratification basis has been extended to status holder 2-star category and above. This, I think, will help a lot of exporters. Many of you will know that right now advance authorization can be taken under 4 slabs or 4 categories. The first is you can take on the basis of CO norms. The second is you can take it on the basis of norms fixed by the norms committee, which are also known as ad hoc norms. Third is you can take it on self-declaration basis, where you declare norms which are subject to ratification by the norms committee. And last is self-ratification basis, which right now is only available to AEO holder, wherein they themselves will declare the norm certified by a chartered engineer, which will not be subject to any ratification by the norms committee. It will only be subject to audit by the DGFT officials at a later date if required. But that is I would say the priority number one if it comes to the advance authorization scheme and the 4 slabs which are there. Now, in the foreign trade policy, they have extended this benefit apart from AEO holder certificates to also status holders 2-star category and above. But this is subject to certain conditions and which are very important and to be kept in mind. Firstly, the applicant should have submitted an application with the customs for obtaining AEO certificate. So if read with this condition, essentially what they mean is that now, apart from AEO holders, we will also make this benefit available to all those status holders category, 2-star category and above, who have already made an application with the customs for getting a EO certificate and their application is pending with the customs. So it is not that simply if you are a status holder, 2-star category and above, you will be entitled to get advance authorization on self-ratification basis. You also have to file an application with the customs to get a EO certificate. In fact, in the formalities which they have provided under this, they have required the applicant to make available the acknowledgement of filing the documents with the customs for getting a EO certificate. So that stringent is the condition. Then application for EO certificate should not have been rejected. So if the application for getting a EO certificate is rejected, you will not be eligible to take advance authorization on self-ratification basis, even though you may be a status holder 2-star category and above. Another condition which they have put is no show cause notice should have been issued to the applicant under the customs and GST law in the current and last 3 financial year. This, according to me, is a very, very onerous condition which they have put. I'll once again reiterate. It states that no show cause notice should have been issued to the applicant under the customs law, GST law in the current and last 3 years. This condition, according to me, is near impossible. In my limited experience of 10 years, I have hardly seen any exporters who can make this claim or who can boast about the fact that they have not been issued any single show cause notice under the customs and GST law in the last couple of years. There will be hardly few exporters who will be in a position to qualify and fulfill this condition. So simply on account of this condition, I feel that even though there may be many people who otherwise may want to avail the benefit of advance authorization on self-ratification basis, but simply on account of this condition, they will not be eligible to take benefit of this particular scheme. I think and I hope that many people will start making representation to the ministries, officials. They will write letters to the DGFT officials stating that requesting that this condition should be waived, or it should be revised to put that no prosecution should have been initiated rather than writing that no show cause notice should have been issued. Because there is a difference between initiation of prosecution and no show cause notice being issued. Show cause notice can be issued for any reason to you, even in cases where there are interpretation or questions of interpretation involved. But this condition in itself, in the manner in which it has been put right now, is certainly onerous and will lead to a lot of status holders not qualifying to avail the benefit of this particular incentive. Then an applicant should have positive net current assets, which is akin to one of the conditions for getting a EO certificate. And lastly, if AEO certificate is not issued within 120 days, the applicant will have to get the norms fixed from the norms committee. So meaning thereby, like I said, if you apply for this benefit on the ground that your AEO application is pending, and if it is rejected or if you are unable to get the EO certificate within 120 days, then it will be akin to a situation that you have obtained the advance authorization on self-declaration basis, and the matter will be referred to the norms committee to get norm fixed from the norms committee. Then we have some other changes under the what I'll do is maybe I'll take all the questions after the advance authorization scheme, and then we'll move on to the other section. So I'll just quickly complete the section on advance authorization. Meanwhile, if you have any questions in your mind, you can put it down in the chat box and we'll take it after this and maybe one or two other slides for advanced authorization. Then another change is they've introduced conditions, additional conditions for obtaining advanced authorization on an annual basis. So firstly, now they put that exporters should have made some exports in the last 2 financial years. So this condition was not there in the erstwhile foreign trade policy, meaning thereby that even new companies or new exporters who had not made any export in the previous couple of years, they were also eligible to take advance authorization on annual basis. But now under the new foreign trade policy, only those exporters who have made some export in the previous 2 financial year will be eligible to take advance authorization on annual basis. Next is they put a minimum and a maximum cap for getting advance authorization on annual basis. They've stipulated that CIF value will be either 1 crore, which is the minimum level, or up to 300% of exports, both deemed and physical, made in the last financial year, whichever is higher. So meaning thereby the minimum value is 1 crore and the maximum value is 300% of export made in the previous financial year, including both deemed and export, whichever is higher. Next, a special advance authorization for export of articles of apparel and clothing accessory has been continued. Now this declaration can be availed on self-declaration basis, because under the earlier policy, special advance authorization can be taken only if the norms have been fixed by under the CON, or if the norms have been fixed by the norms committee. It could not have been obtained on self-declaration basis. But now under the new foreign trade policy, it can be obtained even on self-declaration basis. So this will also help a lot of garment exporters, exporters who are exporting clothing accessories. They will also be in a position to first get a advance authorization basis the norms which they list before the DGFT office, which will be subject to ratification by the norms committee. So they will not have to first get the norm fixed from the norms committee and then get a license. So this certainly will help a lot of exporters. Then in case of spices, they have put a higher minimum value addition of 25%, which is higher than the normal value addition requirement of 15%. And the last change on this slide is very important and very critical for a lot of exporters. Now they've stipulated that advance authorization on self-declaration basis cannot be obtained in case you want to import any input in respect of which the rate of basic customs duty, applicable rate of basic customs duty, is more than 30%. So right now this condition was not there, meaning thereby going ahead, if you intend to import any input into India under the advance authorization scheme, where the rate of basic customs duty is more than 30%, then advance authorization on self-declaration basis will not be available to you. So considering this provision, I would request all the exporters who have been availing advance authorization on self-declaration basis kindly undertake this study whether they are importing any input on which rate of basic customs duty is 30% or more. And if they have any such input, they should immediately file an application with the norms committee to get the norms fixed for their export product. Otherwise, they will not be eligible to take the benefit of advance authorization. So I will again clarify, this is only in context of advance authorizations which are to be taken on self-declaration basis. This is not applicable for other types of advance authorization, only for advance authorizations who are intending to take it on self-declaration basis. Then they put a timeline for challenging the decision rendered by the norms committee. They put that representation against norm committee's decision will not be entertained after a period of 12 months from the date of uploading the said decision on the DGFT website. So right now they provided a time limit of 90 days within which the the norms committee decision could be challenged. And if you intended to challenge it after a period of 90 days, you were required to pay a composition of 5,000. But there was no end of limitation period. It could have been challenged even, let's assume, after 2 years. But now they put a time limit that in any case, it cannot be challenged after 12 months from the date of uploading the decision on the website, DGFT website. So they put a bracket within which you have to challenge the decision given by the norms committee. So therefore, again, I would request all the exporters who have got their norm fixed from the norms committee, take a call whether you want to challenge it or not. And if you have to challenge it, kindly do so within the stipulated period of 12 months. Don't wait for it to expire. Then pre-import condition has not been removed in case of import of drugs from unregistered forces. So now why I put this point is that when the new foreign trade policy was being unveiled, there were a lot of news portals who were reporting that that pre-import condition has been removed in case of import of drugs from unregistered sources. That is not the case. So why this confusion has arisen is on account of the fact that this condition was there at two places in the foreign trade policy. One, it was a part of the foreign trade policy itself. And secondly, it was a part of Appendix 4J, which provided a list of all the inputs which will be subject to pre-import conditions. So what they have done is they have removed it from the foreign trade policy and they have kept it in the Appendix 4J. So therefore, many people are reporting that in case of import of drugs from unregistered forces under the new foreign trade policy, pre-import condition is not applicable. That unfortunately is not the case. That would have made the entire situation very absurd, because it can't be so that you fulfill the export obligation and then you start importing drugs from unregistered sources under the advance authorization scheme. That is not the intention. Then penalty for shortfall in minimum value addition has been increased from existing 1% to 3% of shortfall in FOB value of INR. So again, if at the time of getting EODC, there is a shortfall in achieving minimum value addition, then you will now be required to pay a higher penalty of 3%, which was earlier 1%. Lastly, there is no change in RoTAP scheme. So going ahead also, exporters who are making export under the advance authorization scheme, EOU scheme and SEZ scheme, they are still not eligible to avail the benefit of RoTAP when they are making export outside India, even though it was hoped and anticipated that under the new foreign trade policy, these exporters will be removed from the ineligible category under the RoTAP scheme. But unfortunately, now also they have not made this change. So if a advance authorization holder or a EOU or SEZ unit is making export outside India under the new foreign trade policy also, they will not be eligible to avail the benefit of the RoTAP scheme. Then we have new notifications which have been issued under the customs law for the purposes of this new foreign trade policy. This is only for your reference, and these will be applicable only for advance authorizations which have been taken under the new foreign trade policy. The earlier advance authorizations will be subject to the old notification only. Now I'll take the questions which have been posted in the link.
Nobody's posted.
I think no one has posted any. Any question?
I have posted one question.
Okay, 1 second. I'll just. So the first question is, if we are making application in FY 23-24, that is in April this month, how to calculate it? I'm assuming that this will be in relation to status holder certificate. So if you are applying under the, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Okay. So if you are applying under the new foreign trade policy, then the revised or the reduced level of export performance will have to be seen, and the revised stipulations will be there in the sense that you will have to show certain exports made by you in the last 3 financial years, and the fact that you will be in a position to make use of the reduced export level of export performance. That both the things will be applicable to you.
So my question is, suppose, is it correct to make an application in the month of February of every financial year? Because see, the question is current financial year plus preceding 3 years.
Right,
so
right.
The maximum turnover will be available for when you calculate for the 4 years.
Right,
Is that
right.
correct? Suppose
Correct.
today we are in April. So if I am calculating current financial year means hardly 5 days is over, I have no exports.
Right,
So
right.
today if I am making an application, it means last 3 years performance is only be taken.
Correct, correct. Correct. So I understand your point. You certainly can make applications for getting a higher category certificate. There is absolutely no problem. In fact, in the policy itself, there is a provision which allows you to do so by surrendering the old license. You can take a new license after giving a revised export performance. That absolutely is possible.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir, please continue.
Mike is hello.
Yes, please continue.
My question is that my one exporter having existence for last 2 years only, and though they are eligible for export status holder, so they crossed 3 million export.
Right.
Can they apply because they don't have the export performance in 3 years? They only
No. Sir, under the new foreign trade policy, you will have to show some exports in the last 3 financial year. Earlier policy.
That is the new company came into existence for last 2 years only.
I understand, sir, but unfortunately, right now the provisions do not allow you to do so. But still, I'm not saying that all hope is lost. You can certainly make an application to the policy relaxation committee seeking a relaxation to that effect. But since this provision has been implemented for the first time, only time will tell whether they allow that sort of an extension or not. But considering the existing provisions, unfortunately, you will not be eligible to take the benefit.
Okay.
Any other questions, or should we move on to changes in the EPCG scheme? I think we'll move on to EPCG, and if you have any questions, we can take it up in the last towards the end. I'll now invite Abhishek to take over the EPCG changes.
Good afternoon, friends. I will be dealing with the changes made in the foreign trade policy under EPCG and EOU scheme. Though there are some changes in EOU and EPCG, but broadly the policy remains the same as mentioned in previous one. Rajat, next. Right. In the previous policy, EPCG license can be obtained for project import as well. Therefore, if anybody is importing the capital goods under project import scheme, they can clear the same under EPCG. However, the said benefit is no more available in the new foreign trade policy. Similarly, the government has also removed post-export EPCG scheme in the new foreign trade policy 2023. The said scheme was introduced during the year somewhere in 2012. The scheme was not very popular among the industries, and to my knowledge, only 15 to 20 licenses have been issued till date under post-export. The same has now been removed in the new policy. Similarly, the government has also, in Chapter 5 of Foreign Trade Policy, a transitional arrangement has been made where the government has incorporated saying authorization issued for past policy period, that is 2002-7, 2004-9, 2009-14, and 15-20 will be governed by the corresponding FTP provision and handbook of procedure unless otherwise stated. So if any license is issued in foreign trade policy in 15-20, so that will be governed with the earlier policy and not the current one. So earlier there was always a confusion in the minds of the department as well as in the industry that if any company is procuring capital goods indigenously, then whether validity period from invalidation letter will be counted or validity period from EPCG will be counted. The government has introduced a specific provision in this regard, which says that validity period of invalidation will be coterminous with the validity period of EPCG authorization. Correspondingly, EPCG notification has also been issued under the Custom Act. The notification number is 26/2023. The notification was issued on 1st April 2023 for EPCG scheme. As you must be aware of, there are various provisions under Chapter 5 of Foreign Trade Policy where EPCG license holder has to fulfill export obligation, that is 75% of 6 times of duty saved amount. These options are, if anyone is procuring capital goods indigenously, then they have to fulfill 75% of 6 times of duty saved amount instead of 100%. Similarly, if any exporter has fulfilled their export obligation within the period of 3 years, so in that case also they are supposed to file 75%, if they have completed the export obligation 75%, then also they can apply for EODC with the DGFT department. Thirdly, in the case of reduced export obligation for green technology products, if we are exporting any such products, so in that case also we are supposed to we have to fulfill 75%. So earlier there was a doubt if I'm qualifying among 2 categories, so whether the benefit will be 50% or it will be 75%. So one specific clause has been inserted by the government saying that even if you are qualifying 2 conditions, only 1 benefit will be available and not the 2. These are the changes made under the Handbook of Procedure. So if we are exporting our goods through a third party, so earlier there was a confusion that if third party makes any changes to goods, like suppose repacking and all, so whether that will be counted in fulfillment of EPCG authorization. So government has made it clear, the government has incorporated a specific paragraph in this regard that goods manufactured by the authorization holder has to be exported as it is by the third party without making any changes. So if they made any changes, any sort of repacking or something like that, then certainly that export will not be counted. Secondly, this amendment has also been made in the case of third party, that earlier there should be there was a specific clause in the Handbook of Procedure that there should be an agreement between the authorization holder and third party export. However, the said condition has now been removed, so no more agreement will be required. So based on the documents submitted by you, there are some declaration that you have to submit shipping bills. In the shipping bills copies, the third party as well as the license holder, both the names should be specified in the license. So if that is coming, so definitely your license will get closed, and there is no requirement of any specific agreement between the authorization holder and third party export. So now the license holder is now required to submit the annual report before 30th June, and any sort of delay will lead to a penalty of ₹5,000 per year for each authorization. This clause was there in the earlier policy in 2002, and then in 2009-14 and 15-20 as well. However, no one was taking it seriously. But now the government has also imposed a condition that if anyone is not filing any annual return, then the penalty of ₹5,000 per year will be charged. And the DGFT RA is also taking it very seriously, and without any annual report, they are not issuing any EODC license. Now coming to the next point, paragraph, if anyone is any EPCG authorization holder wish to procure the capital goods from SEZ unit, so in that case, they have to issue the certificate of supplies from DGFT RA. So earlier it was also known as TRA. This TRA was earlier provided by the Custom Authority. Then in 2019, a circular 21 was issued by the DGFT, which after 2019, this TRA was issued by the DGFT authority, but there was no specific paragraph in the Foreign Trade Policy and Handbook of Procedure. Now 5.08 has been inserted in Handbook of Procedure, which specifically deals with procurement from SEZ unit. Now coming to the blockwise extension and export obligation extension. So 2% in case of blockwise extension fee, 2% of duty saved amount has to be deposited. Application of blockwise has to be submitted within the period of 6 months from expiry of first block. So earlier it was 3 months. Now they have made to 6 months. And after 6 months, also one can submit the application. But for that, they have to pay the late fee penalty of ₹10,000. Similar thing has been incorporated in export obligation extension as well. So now the 2% composition fee on unfulfilled export obligation has to be paid. And this extension can be made up to the period of 8 years and by the RA. And after 8 years, RA does not have any power to extend the export obligation. Now coming into the EOU scheme. So there are some cases where EOU procures the goods, raw material. Either they import the raw material or they procure from DTA. But due to some of the other reasons that raw material gets unutilized, so they have the option that they can transfer the said goods to the another EOU, or they can dispose of in DTA with intimation to the custom department, or they can export the said goods. However, now the condition has been imposed: if EOU unit is disposing of the raw material to DTA, then they have to fulfill these importability conditions, such as if during the DTA sale, if any import license is required, then DTA unit has to take the import license. Only then they can clear the goods to the DTA unit. Otherwise, it will not get cleared. Similarly, earlier LOP can be renewed by the Development Commissioner for a period. For a period of 5 years, but now the Development Commissioner has been granted a power that they can issue the LOP for a lesser period of less than 5 years also, in case extension of LOP required for completing exit formalities. Thirdly, earlier IC number of EOU unit was granted by the Jurisdictional Development Commissioner if the same was not allotted. However, the said condition is also removed, meaning thereby if any new unit is being set up as an EOU, so they are supposed to take the IC from the DGFT, and Development Commissioner will not be granted any IC. Fourth is, earlier EOU unit, after intimating the same to the custom authority, can clear the goods for testing /R&D purpose up to ₹5 lakhs per annum without payment of duty. The said limit has now been increased to ₹10 lakh. Similarly, if authorized economic operator has been granted exemption from bank guarantee, subject to the condition that it has not been issued SCN or confirmed demand during the preceding 3 years under the FTDRA Act and FEMA Act. The last is, if goods are taken out by EOU Gems and Jewelry Unit for subcontracting purposes, then goods are required to be brought back to unit within 90 days. However, now the custom authority may grant an extension of time beyond 90 days in some cases. Now coming, so basically in deemed export chapter, this chapter is broadly the same and is aligned with the previous policy, and there is no major change have been made in this. Now if you have any question in relation to this EPCG scheme or EOU scheme, please let us know. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so my question is that recently in the EPCG scheme, the green technology has been promoted, right?
Right.
And the export obligation has been fixed at 75% of 6 times, right?
Right.
For
Right.
green technology. But regarding Maruti Suzuki, what we need to see is that in the green technology, whether hybrid vehicles are included or it includes only the battery operated vehicles. So we need to see the purview. So is battery operated vehicles includes hybrid vehicle also, or only the plug-in charger type of vehicles are included in green technology?
So you're from Maruti?
Yeah. Sir, hello.
Will
SCG on this side. So what are the green technology product? So it has been not very much clarified in the policy, but certainly there are some items which have mentioned that these will be considered as the green technology products. So we will certainly note your question and reply it separately. What is the scope and coverage of the green technology products? So if you are covered in those green technology products, so certainly you will be eligible to fulfill the export obligation by making the lesser amount of export of 75%. If your product is not covered in that green technology, so you will not be eligible for that.
Okay.
So we will have, because it is some sort of separate type of question which we have not examined. What is the total scope of the green technology products? Okay. Sure. You send your question. Certainly, we will answer you by tomorrow or day after. Huh?
Yeah, just because I asked this question, just because in the last FTP, it was written that all the electronically operated vehicles will come under green technology, right? But now it specifically mentions that excluding hybrids.
Yes. So they have certain item included and certain item excluded. So you just send us an email. So after examining it thoroughly, we will reply to that. Sure. And you are बताइएगा.
Any other question? I think we should start with the next slide. Shweta, please take.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be taking up the next session. Which deals with, the first slide deals with the new amnesty scheme. So here, the basics as were introduced by Rajat in the previous session, I'll be taking up the finer nuances of it. So in this scheme, the DGFT which it has brought out, first we need to see the coverage, then scheme, then pendency, and then there are many other finer nuances to it. So this particular scheme covers the advance authorizations and EPCGs issued under the FTP 2009 to 15 till 31/3/2015. So first thing we need to note is that it does not cover the policy of 1520, FTP 1520, meaning thereby that if there is any advance authorization or EPCG license holder, EPCG license, which has been issued under the foreign trade policy of 1520, then in that case, that particular matter will not be covered under this amnesty scheme. This amnesty scheme covers matters from 9 to 15 and prior to that. So for 9 to 15, it specifically says that the license should have been issued till 31/3/2015. For advance authorization and EPCGs issued for the FTP 2004-9 or before, that is limited to those authorizations whose export obligation period, original or extended, was valid beyond 12/8/2013. So in this case, for 2004, 9 or before, if there is any export obligation defaults under the advance authorization or EPCG matters and which are pending. So in those cases, this is limited to those authorization whose obligation period. This is not talking about the issuance of the license. Note the differences, please. Whose obligation period, original or extended, was valid beyond 12/8/2013. Meaning thereby, if the obligation period or the extended obligation period had already expired before 12/8/2013, then in that case, those cases will not be covered under the amnesty scheme. So the exporters can see as to what were the advance authorizations licenses which they had taken under the previous policies of 9/15 and 4/9 or before, and see whether there are any disputes with respect to the pending pending export obligations, and to check whether those will be covered under this scheme or not. Now the scheme. This scheme covers all custom duties that were exempted in proportion to the unfulfilled export obligation, and 100% of interest except on CVD and SAD. So I'll explain this. Suppose you had imported the goods under the advance authorization or EPCG, on which the duty saved amount was, say, ₹100. So in that case, if you're going for this scheme, amnesty scheme, you will be required, and that ₹100 includes your basic custom duty also, your cesses also, your CVD also, your SAD also. It includes everything, the duty saved amount. So in that case, if you're going for the amnesty scheme, then you will have to pay that 100% of the duties that were exempted in proportion to the unfulfilled export obligation, because certainly at times there can be scenarios wherein certain portion of the export obligation has been fulfilled, but balance is not fulfilled. So in that case, that will be made proportionate. And you will have to pay the interest, which will be 100%, except on CVD and SAD. So on the CVD and SAD portion, there will be no interest levied, but you will have to pay the interest on the BCD portion. And also an important point to note here is that if there is any other duty or cesses levied, which would have levied at the time of import, had you not taken the advance authorization or the EPCG, then basically the duty saved portion, then in that case, you will have to pay interest on that also. Say, for example, on the basic custom duty, you pay a cess also. So for the purposes of calculation of 100% of interest, you will have to take in account the value of the amount foregone as cess also. If the goods were subject to, say, anti-dumping duties at the time of import, but due to the authorizations taken, you have not paid those duties, then for the purposes of calculation of 100%, those duties will also be taken. So this is a kind of a negative list. It says except CVD and SAD, everything else would be covered under the 100% interest portion. This is a very, very welcome move, I would say, because out of the total duties, at times we have seen that the majority portion is always the CVD and SAD. So definitely you do have to pay the CVD and SAD portion, but interest component is a big, big saving on that. So so all the exporters can analyze what all the pending obligations for that period, and accordingly check whether to apply for the amnesty scheme or not. Now, where these amnesty scheme will apply, pendency. So cases which have already been adjudicated or pending adjudication, either originally or in appeal, there this case will apply. For cases which have already been adjudicated or pending before adjudication and where appeal has not been filed, firms will produce a copy of the closure letter under the scheme to the adjudicating authority. I will make it clear in this manner. The first typically talks about that cases which have already been adjudicated. So at first level, it has been adjudicated or it is pending adjudication, and thereafter you have not filed any appeal. So those cases can be taken for the amnesty scheme. Second is, the cases have been adjudicated at the first level. You have gone in for the appeal also, and the matters are pending at the appellate level at any stage. So those cases also will be covered. An important point here to note is that, which is regarding the first point, which says that cases which have already been adjudicated or pending adjudication, either originally or in appeal. So here, since it says which have already been adjudicated, there could be cases where the matter has been adjudicated disposed of against the exporter, and thereafter he has not even filed the appeal, the time period for filing of appeal has also gone. The matter may have been referred to the recovery team, but still whether those cases will be covered here or not for the amnesty, that is, the wordings as such do not suggest that those are excluded. So, but the intent definitely, as far as these wordings are concerned, does not appear to be that those kind of cases should be included. However, if there are any cases for falling under this kind of category, that where the recovery proceedings are just pending and everything else is closed, we would recommend that you still apply for the amnesty scheme, so that at least the majority portion, at least like it's trying your luck, because if we go by the statutory provisions which have been brought in, then in that case, definitely you are eligible. So the matter needs to be taken up in this regard. In cases where an appeal has been filed, the closure letter will have to be submitted to the appellate authority. So where you will have to submit the closure letter to the appellate authority where it is an appeal. If it is with the adjudicating authority, you will have to file the closure letter with the adjudicating authority for the closure of the matter. Any questions here? Maybe we'll take up the questions towards the session at the end together.
Hello, what about the cases in where only show cause notice is issued and adjudication part has not yet come up?
Yes,
and,
sir. So that is pending adjudication. Those will be covered.
Sorry, can you please repeat?
Since this show cause notice has been issued, and those cases are typically pending adjudication. Maybe the hearing has happened or not happened. In both the cases, since they're pending the adjudication, those cases will be covered in this.
Okay.
And you can opt for the amnesty scheme. Due dates, registration under the scheme is to be done before 30/6/2023. So the time window which they have provided, we are already running in April, and they say that for the next in next 3 months itself, by 30th of June, you have to decide and file for the amnesty. The time period is a bit short because all the calculations need to be done, all the workings need to be done, documents needs to be pulled out, and then you have to apply before that period for the amnesty scheme. And once you have applied, then payment of duties along with interest is to be made before 30th of September 2023. After that, once you have made the payment, then you can take up the matter before with the closure letter before the relevant authorities who has before whom the matter was pending, maybe at the appellate level or at the adjudication level. Jurisdiction in this case, payment of customs duties would be along with interest would be payable before the jurisdictional customs authority. So it could happen that you might have imported because you might have imported the goods maybe from one port or multiple ports. So here it says that the customs duty need to be paid before the your jurisdictional customs authority. And you have to submit the proof of payment to the regional authority of the DGFT concerned. This is how the fine prints take place and how the matter will get closed. Cases which are not covered typically are cases under investigation, cases adjudicated involving fraud, misdeclaration, or unauthorized diversion of material or capital goods. So basically, the intent is to cover the cases which are genuine cases and where the export obligation could not be fulfilled due to any reason, due to market demand, due to any personal reason, but that is not due to any fraud, misdeclaration, or unauthorized diversion of any material or capital goods, or where the matter is under still investigation stage, then those cases are also not covered under the amnesty scheme. An important rider which they have put to this scheme is that once you pay the duties, you will not be allowed the credit of CVD portion or refund of the SAD portion. And for this, you will have to give an undertaking to the authorities. This is a little unwelcome step because otherwise what would have happened is that you would have paid 100% of the duties and along with the interest on the BCD portion, on the customs duty portion rather, I would say. And while making the payment of the 100% of the duties portion, you could have even claimed the refund for the credit of CVD and SAT. There are various cases, even for many of our clients, we have done those cases wherein we have got the refund of the credits of the CVD, the refund of the CVD and SAT. But for the amnesty scheme, they say that you are not allowed to take the refund of CVD and SAT. So basically that will be a complete cost to the exporter. So this also needs to be kept in mind by the exporter while analyzing whether he would like to go under the amnesty scheme or not. Because normally if you would have gone, not gone under the amnesty scheme, but gone ahead and paid all the interest and duties, so he would have been entitled to take the refund of CVD and SAT, but while going under the amnesty scheme, he will not be allowed to take the refund of CVD and SAT.
So what is other, sorry, I'm interrupting. So yes, what is the other alternative?
Sir, other alternative is like if you have not paid, if the export obligation for those periods are pending and the matter is either under adjudication or at the appellate stage, so you're definitely contesting the matter. So in that case, if there is an order which comes, suppose to your negative, and you decide to pay the complete duty portion and along with the applicable interest, which is not capped at 100% of the BCD, that could run into maybe 100%, 200%, 300%, and that interest will also be on the CVD and SAT portion also. This particular leverage has been given only in the amnesty scheme, that interest to be paid only on the customs duty portion, not on the CVD and SAT portion. So the other option is typically you pay the complete customs duty, including CVD, including SAT, including interest, whatever is the interest on complete BCD, complete CVD, SAT, whether it becomes 100%, 200%, 300%, whatsoever it becomes. And then accordingly thereafter, calculate and see that you will be able to take the credit of this CVD and SAT portion. That is the normal adjudication route. But if you're going under the amnesty route, then you will not be entitled for the refund. However, the interest applicability has been substantially reduced. Shall I proceed?
Yes, please. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Other changes in the FTP and HVP. This is pertaining to the general changes which have been brought in under the foreign trade policy. So IEC on export of service or technology. Earlier there was the IEC for the service exporters. The service exporters used to take the IEC only when they were applying for the benefits under the foreign trade policy. So at the time of rendering of the services, they were not having the IEC, but later on when they decided to go for any benefit under the policy, then they used to apply for the IEC and then accordingly claim the benefit. So now a provision has been made under the policy that the IEC shall be necessary only when the service provider is taking benefits under the policy. So from day one, you have to decide while rendering of this service, you have to take the IEC. It cannot happen that today you don't take the IEC and tomorrow when you decide to go for the benefits and thereafter you apply for the IEC. Though this particular provision was earlier more applicable with respect to the SEIS scheme, because there were so many exporters who used to take the SEIS benefit, and wherein whenever they used to apply for the SEIS scripts, so that time they used to take the IEC for their entities. But now the SEIS itself has gone. The only benefit which the service providers can typically take is the status holder benefit under the FTP. So if they are intending to go for that, then in that case, they should have the IEC on the date of rendering of the service also. So this is typically, basically in favor of, this is typically overturning a decision which was rendered by the Bombay High Court also, which was in line with the previous FTP 1520, and so basically it is to overturn that decision also. As far as this comet is concerned, you must have heard a lot about that. There are so many, there is a complete new chapter for this comet under the policy, which was not there earlier and all. There has been so much focus everywhere, you must have heard. But actually this is nothing. These comet provisions were very much scattered in the earlier policy. Some were there in the policy, some were there in the public notices. Means at many places the provisions were scattered. Now they have streamlined all those provisions under one chapter. Specifically under the foreign trade policy, there is typically no change under this comet related policy. Advanced goods received. So if you're importing, say, restricted items, and you don't have the advance authorization for import of sorry, not advance authorization, license, I'm sorry. So you're importing the restricted items, and there is no license to import those restricted items at the time when the goods have landed on the ports of India, and but you get the license thereafter. So earlier, what was happening was that the goods used to come to the port, and if you were not having a license to import the goods, you were not being allowed to import the goods. However, practically, what importers used to do is that they used to keep the clearance pending and apply for advance authorization and get the get the license, and then accordingly file it and get the clearance done. So basically, practically it was happening, and that time also DGFT used to give the approval also. But now this kind of provision, but it was a lot litigated, it was a lot disputed also, because there was no specific provision in the FTP which was allowing this kind of practice typically for restricted items. But now this has been specifically incorporated in the FTP, and wherein the powers of the DGFT have been widened to say that if the goods have arrived at the port, you don't have a license to import those goods at that point in time. You apply the license, the DGFT will give you the license along with the permission to clear the goods, even post facto, that is after because the license was dated after the goods have arrived. So earlier they were not clearing, but now if the DGFT allows, then in that case, the goods can be cleared. Here also a discretion has been given to DGFT. Sometimes it can happen, in fact, if the goods have arrived and there is no license at that point in time, DGFT can later on deny also. This is a discretionary power which has been given to the DGFT. In the meanwhile, what the importers can do, they can clear the goods for warehousing, and later on they can clear for the home consumption. But this is subject to the discretion of the DGFT. Import of samples. No authorization shall be required for import of bona fide technical and trade samples of items restricted in ITC-HS except defense security items, seeds, bees, and new drugs. So if you're importing the bona fide samples, trade samples of the items which are in restricted category, so in that case, even though they are restricted and a license is otherwise required to import, but since it's a bona fide sample, in that case, there is no license required. But there are certain categories for which are accepted from this. And so for those categories, if you are importing a sample also, then in that case, you will still require a license. The exceptions are defense and security, seeds, bees, and new drugs. Let me tell you that seeds, bees, and new drugs were there earlier also as an exception to this category, but defense and security items were not. So they have newly added these defense and security items. Import of restricted, prohibited, canalized through STs, any item including samples or prototypes of items whose import policy is restricted or prohibited or is canalized, they're not permitted to be as a part of the passenger baggage except with a valid permission from the DGFT. So if you're importing samples or prototypes whose policy is restricted, basically restricted means you have to take a license from the DGFT. So you cannot import it as a part of the passenger baggage. So earlier they were completely not allowed, but now with the valid permission of the DGFT, the restricted items can also be imported as sample through the passenger baggage. Mercanting trade. For the mercanting trade, even though the mercanting trade transactions were taking place earlier also, it's not that they were prohibited, and just by specifically mentioning in the DGFT, it does not mean that they are something new. Mercanting trade transaction is typically wherein a person situated here in India, and he basically buys goods, say from Australia, and sells those goods, say in US. So the goods do not enter into the Indian territory. The goods do not move out of the Indian territory. But the person who is undertaking that transaction, he is located in the Indian territory. So in that case, this is typically known as mercanting trade. These transactions used to take place earlier also and were very much valid with respect to the RBI guidelines. But a small paragraph has been specifically introduced in the DGFT policy, Earlier there was always a confusion with respect to what about the prohibited and restricted goods. Can the mercantile trade transactions be undertaken in prohibited and restricted goods also? And practically they were always disputed, though there was no specific para, no specific this thing, but since in normal parlance it was like, if it's prohibited you cannot deal in those goods, if it's restricted you need a license. So going on that count, typically there were lots of disputes. Now they have very clearly mentioned that the goods which are except in sites and commit list, apart from those goods, anything can be traded as part of the mercantile trade. So you can buy even the restricted and prohibited goods from Australia and send them to US. Because the goods are not entering into the union territory. Commit list is typically the dual items list, and sites list is typically the goods for the endangered species, like skin, hides of say crocodile or something like that, which items which pertain to the endangered species. Third party exports / merchant exports, EBRC or export realization from RBI's EDPMS, wherever available in DGFT IT system, export order and invoice should be in the name of third party exporter. So wherever there is any transaction which is being taken through the merchant exporter, so there is a manufacturer and he is supposed having the advance authorization, but the export order is with someone else who is the merchant exporter. So the merchant exporter used to procure the goods from the manufacturer and then export. So in that case, these are typically known as third party exports. So in such cases, all the EBRC, all the export realizations from RBI's EDPMS, export order, invoice, everything should be in the name of the third party exporter. Only then that will be counted towards the export obligation of that advance authorization holder. Private bonded warehouse under section 65. So this is more of clarificatory in nature, reason being and to avoid the disputes which used to occur earlier. So under section 65, you can have the private bonded warehouse wherein you could undertake the manufacturing activities also, which we in normal parlance we call MOOWR scheme also. So in such warehouses, the warehouse owner, the persons used to procure the goods from domestic area also, they used to import the goods also, whether it's the raw material or the capital goods. So there was a para inserted earlier which provided that such warehouses shall be entitled to procure goods from domestic manufacturers without payment of duties. Supplies made by a domestic supplier to such notified warehouses shall be treated as physical exports, provided payments are made in free foreign exchange. Now this para has been completely removed, which is the right thing to do. Reason being, there was no such exemption flowing from anywhere in the customs law or under the GST law, even if you are without reading the FTP. So earlier also, if there is a manufacturer who is having a private bonded warehouse under section 65 of the Customs Act, so earlier also he used to procure the goods from the normal manufacturers in DTA, and he used to pay GST on that. So now also there is no such kind, and but due to this para, it was always a matter of dispute whether whether he could procure free from any payment of duty or taxes. So now this paragraph has been removed, meaning thereby the person can procure it on payment of GST, and thereafter if he is exporting his final product, then in that case definitely he can take the refund of the input taxes. If he is selling in the domestic market his manufactured product, then definitely he can utilize that credit for the payment of his outward taxes. So this is more of the streamlining to avoid the disputes. Regularization of EO default and settlement of customs duty in cases where the matter is under NCLT purview, the settlement provisions do not apply. This particular provision was not there in the earlier FTP, wherein if the matter was in NCLT, so there could have been certain instances that parties might have gone to the settlement commission also, and because there was no bar specifically, but now there is a specific bar put in wherein if the matter is before the NCLT, then in that case the settlement provisions will not apply. Surrender of IEC. IEC can be surrendered only if all authorizations, obligations have been closed for the IEC or are transferred to the IEC of the new entity. This condition was specifically not there, though practically, definitely, if you were to surrender your IEC, so all the conditions definitely which are specified now were being practically checked whether there is no authorization or obligation which is pending on your IEC. But there was no mandate per se, or you say there was no specific condition per se in the earlier FTP. Pre-shipment agency, with respect to the pre-shipment inspection agency, the application for recognition in respect of pre-shipment inspection agency can now be made online completely. Even the pre-shipment inspection agency can generate the pre-shipment inspection certificate also on online. Earlier, they were all offline. So now the entire mechanism for the recognition also for the generation of PSIC, both can be done online. EU's self-certification scheme under GSP, this is nothing but more of just, streamlining with the EU GSP scheme also. So if you are an exporter to the European countries, in that case, you are entitled to go for the GSP for self-certifying scheme. In such a case, the REX number and REX registration, etc. used to be taken. So now they have just specifically put in that in such a case, there will be a mechanism for complete post-verification process by competent authority, and which will be laid down in one of the appendix. It's not that this post-verification process was not there earlier, but it's that it was being done by the audit team separately, and they used to have their own SOPs. They used to, nothing was streamlined as to what will be the SOPs, how will they do it, what all documents they will require. But now we believe that some sort of SOPs should come in this when the appendices will be rolled out. At that time only we can tell this. District export hubs, I will just touch upon this topic because as far as the exporters and importers are concerned, as of now, this may be of academic use. Because this is more to do from the government side, that they will make the district export hubs, district export promotion committees at each district level to identify the export promotion, the export items for each particular district, like 2 to 3 potential products from each district will be identified. The action plan schemes will be made. They will be sent to the DGFT. Then an action on that would be taken, how to promote those particular products. When we say this with various stakeholders, because this is a promotion committee in which it will be co-chaired by the designated DGFT regional authority with various other stakeholders as its members. So stakeholders would typically would be the exporters. As far as the services of the export promotion activities which these DPCs would be conducting would be in the form of training, development of local industries, dissemination of information through outreach activities, including buyer-seller meets, trade fairs and all. They will organize all these things to enhance, to increase the, to promote the exports from their respective districts. So at best, what the exporters and importers can do is, typically become members of these committees. So as to avail the maximum benefit. But this is once the government brings out the complete procedure for this. Cross-border trade in digital economy. This is really important in going forward scenario. However, as of now, there is no mechanism per se which gives them any kind of benefit, but the government is looking at a very to promote a lot of e-commerce exports. As of now, the e-commerce export barely contribute anything to the exports. If I talk about in numbers, it's hardly 0.5% of the total exports from the country that take place that is done through the e-commerce platforms. So they have defined the e-commerce export of goods and services, e-commerce platform. They have also increased the value limit for exports through courier from 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs per consignment. So the high value items can also be exported through the e-commerce. Apart from that, there is one specific para which says that suitable IT enablement shall be undertaken to ensure seamless delivery of FTP benefits public schemes. So as of now, there are no fiscal benefits provided to the e-commerce exporters, but definitely it says that in future there might be certain benefits which once the scheme is completely rolled out, so and enforced, in that case they might also come up with the benefits to the e-commerce exporters. So this is one next big thing actually which the government is targeting. the objective of this e-commerce export hubs. For this, the government would be creating the e-commerce export hubs, which typically would act as center for favorable business infrastructure and facilities. For example, I would just give you a simple example. Like now we have Gift City in Gujarat, which typically is meant for promotion of all the financial services being exported from India. So on that count, typically this e-commerce export hubs concept would be brought in, wherein various infrastructural facilities, dedicated logistics, all those things will be there, so that the costing and everything can be regulated there, and people can actually export more and more and gain more and more benefit to it. So entitlement under the ECH is, as of now, they don't have any benefits, but the government is, yes, planning to give them the MAI benefit and other benefits, which as of now, we don't know, but they might come up in future. And creation of ECH, it can be done by any private party also. It can be done between the PPP model also. And as far as the private party is concerned, they need to present their application for evaluation to the DGFT, and DGFT will constitute a committee for such evaluation, wherein the members would be there from the revenue department also. And after going through the complete proposal, they will approve that ECH to be established by that private person, and wherein in that particular ECH, various e-commerce exporters can come and establish their facilities for the purposes of exporting their goods. There is a recent change in the customs law, which is pertaining to electronic cash ledger. So under the electronic cash ledger, this has been typically enforced from 1st of April 2023, the online module. However, as far as the regulations are concerned, the regulations were framed in 2022 only. And as far as the regulations are concerned, they came into force from 1st of June to 2022. But there was no modality for the online modality for operating those regulations. So going forward, in the ECL would be the only mechanism for payment of the customs duties. The mechanisms which are there now, which is typically the one is through the TR6 challan, wherein a person goes to the banks for the deposit of the TR6 challan. The other is through NEFT and other online means. So those will be discontinued in future. As of now, all the three modes of payment are working simultaneously. The ECL also, the NEFT, RTGS, internet banking also, and the TR6 challan module also, because this is just a phased, it will be implemented in a phased manner. But however, going further, everything else will be removed, and this will be the only method for the payment of the taxes. And not only the taxes, it also incorporates, the government also aims to bring in the non-tax receipts for CBIC also through this module only. So typically like pre-deposits for filing of the appeals, various charges to be paid by the shipping lines, by the brokers. So all those charges can also be paid through this module only. The fees for the PGAs, that can also be paid, but that is in the third phase typically. So as far as the registration is concerned, what you need to do is that the importers, the CHAs or the couriers, and even the UIN holders under the GST, they can get themselves registered on the IceGate portal for this. And this will be, as I told you, this will be implemented in the phased manner. So from 1/4/2023 to 30/4/2023, this will be made applicable, but it will exclude certain people, so certain situations wherein non-EDI ports will not be covered, deposits with respect to accompanied baggage will not be covered, deposits with respect to the couriers will not be covered, goods imported or exported through international couriers, and deposits other than those specified. When we say other than those specified, typically I mean the duties and cesses, the penalties, whatever is covered as of now. If there is any other payment apart from that, that is not covered. In phase 2, from 1st of May 2023, the payments related to courier shipments would also be done through ECL only. And in phase 3, phase 3 talks about auto debit of self-assessed amount from the ECL when liability becomes due. So if you're filing your bill of entry, there is a liability which becomes due, and that if you have money in your ECL account, that will be automatically debited. So in the third phase, even that is sought to be brought in. Payments made on own ascertainment for various purposes such as pre-deposits for filing of appeals, etc. That will be in phase 3. Phase 3 is also not far away. It's just after phase 2, which will be implemented from 1st of May 2023. Payment towards collection of fees, charges, including participating government agencies during import or export. So that will be implemented through phase 3. So what I'm trying to say here is that it is like the most awaited thing which the government wanted to bring in for payment portal for all types of tax and non-tax receipts by the revenue. However, we have got to know that from 1st of April, a lot of importers are facing difficulties on this while making the payment of customs duty, not only through ECL, but for other modes also, because they have been aligned with the ECL also. So they're not able to pay, and a lot of chaos has been created as of now, which the government is trying to figure out to sort it out. Nature of payment which can be made as of now from the ECL is any duties of customs, including cesses and surcharges levied as customs duty, integrated tax, GST compensation cess, interest, penalty, fee, or any other amount payable under the Customs Act or the Customs Tariff Act. So as of now, you can pay these all duties through the ECL portal. Payment challan in form ECL 3, I will just quickly rush through it because of the shortage of time. So payment challan in form ECL 3 shall be generated by the customs automated system by the person on the basis of own ascertainment of the amount of duty or sum payable. As I told you, that automated system would run in such a manner that if there is a demand created on the portal, it will automatically get debited. So, and it will automatically generate your ECL 3. So one really needs to be careful also, because if there is a demand generated, it will automatically debit. How you have to make the payment is select the payment challan so generated for debit of the amount shown in the payment challan from ECL of such person. Automatic debit allowed by customs automated system where consent for auto debit. But however, you will have to give the consent for this. The successful debit shall be visible on ECL and your amount will be credited to the electronic duty payment ledger. Cash maintained in ECL full. I'll just show you some will be there. It's something like generate mandate form. This mandate form is for that auto debit thing. Thereafter, list of unpaid challans would something look like this. You will automatically see what are your unpaid challans. Thereafter, you will select the respective challan and wherein it will lead you to pay now, and how you can make the payment through the ECL. Deposit into ECL, you can do it through NEFT. There are 12 banks already which have been enabled. NEFT can be done from any bank, but apart from that, through net banking system, there are 12 banks which have been enabled. But for the rest of the banks, the testing is going on and they will be onboarded when the testing completes. However, those 12 banks are majorly all government banks only, and no private bank like HDFC or ICICI or any other these kind of banks are not there. Refund of balance in ECL. It talks about that if there is any amount which is left and which you anticipate definitely that you're not going to use it. So you can at any point in time apply for the refund of balance in ECL. And once you make the payment, then refund shall be decided within 30 days from the date of the application. And once you have made the application, after that your amount in the ECL account will freeze and you will no longer be able to use it for any other purpose, because that will be typically used for the refund only. Now I will hand over to Rajat for taking up section 65A of the Customs Act, which is with respect to the warehousing, which is a very, very important provision that has been brought in this Finance Act.
Thank you, Shweta. So due to paucity of time, I'll quickly rush you through the new provision, section 65A of the Customs Act. I think this is very important for all custom bonded warehouses who have taken registration under the warehousing scheme, including the MOOWR scheme. So one interesting thing to note about this provision is section 65A. This provision has been made a part of the customs law by Finance Act 2023. Even though this provision was not there when the union budget was introduced in the parliament, it was introduced only at the time of discussion of the finance bill in the parliament. And now it has become a part of the customs law. Now, this provision basically provides that this is, first of all, this is applicable only in respect of custom bonded warehouses who have taken registration or permission from the customs authority under Section 65 of the Customs Act to undertake manufacturing and other operations therein, including units which have been registered under the MOOWR scheme. So this provision basically provides that all the units which are undertaking manufacturing therein will not be entitled to avail exemption from payment of IGST and compensation cess going ahead. So meaning thereby all the custom bonded warehouses who are undertaking manufacturing therein, including units which are registered under the MOOWR scheme, going ahead, once this provision is notified, will have to make imports on payment of applicable IGST and compensation cess. So the exemption from these two, IGST and compensation cess, is now being withdrawn. They will be entitled to avail exemption only in respect of other types of customs duties such as basic customs duty, anti-dumping, safeguard and all. But exemption from IGST and compensation cess will not be available to them. So again, I reiterate, it is applicable only in respect of those warehouses who are undertaking manufacturing and other operations after taking permission under Section 65 of the Customs Act, including units which are registered under the MOOWR scheme. Other warehouses, public and private bonded warehouses who are not undertaking manufacturing therein, will continue to avail the exemption from payment of IGST and compensation cess. They will not be covered by virtue of this provision. And it provides for withdrawal of exemption in respect of all and any type of imports, be it import of inputs by them, capital goods, consumables, everything will have to be imported on payment of applicable IGST and compensation cess. So this provision right now has not been introduced, has not been notified. This has just been made a part of law when the Finance Act was passed by the Parliament and it received assent of the Honorable Prime Minister. But it is yet to be notified. Hopefully, in maybe days to come or so, this will be notified by the government. And once notified, the exemption of IGST and compensation will be taken away from all these warehouses. So all those who have already opted and got themselves registered under the MOOWR scheme, or they are planning to do so, kindly keep note of this fact that going ahead, the exemption from IGST and compensation cess will not be available to you. You will be entitled to exemption only in respect of other types of customs duty. So anyone who was planning to set up a unit under the MOOWR scheme and was intending to import capital goods without payment of IGST and compensation cess will no longer be in a position to do so. He will be entitled to exemption only and only from BCD and other types of customs duty. IGST and compensation cess will have to be paid. He can take credit of the IGST and compensation cess if it is otherwise available under the GST law, but outright exemption at the time of import, which is right now available, will not be available going ahead once this provision is notified. Another interesting thing to note is that all such warehouses will have to make imports after filing bill of entry for home consumption in place of the existing mechanism of filing a warehousing bill of entry. So this is also something to be kept note of, that going ahead, once this is notified, it will be they will be required to file bill of entry for home consumption in place of warehousing bill of entry. And lastly, it has been stipulated in the provision itself that this provision will apply only in respect of goods which are imported after this provision is notified. Meaning thereby that if, say, for example, I am a warehouse who's registered under the MOOWR scheme, and if today I make certain imports without payment of IGST and compensation cess, and tomorrow this provision is notified, it does not mean that on all the stock which I already have in my possession, I am required to discharge GST and compensation cess thereon. No, it will be applicable only in respect of those goods which are imported by such a warehouse after the notification of this provision. So this is something to be kept note on, and it is of prime importance. Thank you all for listening to us. I know very less time is available for question and answers, but please ask your questions. And before you ask any questions, I would like to bring this to your notice that we have written a book as far as the new foreign trade policy is concerned. We have given a link. We'll also be sharing a link to purchase the book. Kindly do consider purchasing it. We have put in a lot of efforts to simplify the manner in which the books right now are being circulated, and we have tried and highlighted it area by area. So kindly consider purchasing it if required. Now I'll ask if anyone has any questions. Please do.
So my question is related to advance authorization. In case of GST and custom cases in preceding 3 financial years, so condition is for ratification of norms or condition is for issuance of advance authorization?
So this is applicable only if you intend to avail advance authorization on self-ratification basis. This is not a condition that if you are opting for, say, for example, advance authorization on self-declaration basis, then this condition is not applicable, that norms will not be required to be ratified. It is only if, say, for example, you are a AEO holder and you want to go for advance authorization on self-ratification basis, or not even AEO holder, if you are a status holder who has just made an application for getting a AEO certificate and you still want to go ahead and get an advance authorization on self-declaration basis, then this condition is applicable. So it is only applicable on that small situation.
Right, fine, thank you. See, one more thing, please share this PPT to all.
Sure. We'll share PPT with all the participants. I hope you all had a very knowledgeable session. In case you have any questions, any concern, you can write to us. Our email addresses we have given, and we'll also be sharing the slides with you.
Can I ask?
बोलो सर, tell me.
तो मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था कि सीए सर्टिफिकेशन चाहिए होगा अगर हम ईपीसीजी के लिए वो कर रहे हैं सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेट, मतलब सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेशन के बारे में पूछना मुझे।
ठीक है, रिगार्डिंग
ईपीसीजी।
देखो, ईपीसीजी का जब लाइसेंस लेते हैं तो 2 तरह के सर्टिफिकेट देने पड़ते हैं। वन इज कि आपने कितनी फास्ट में एक्सपोर्ट हुई है इन दी प्रीसीडिंग 3 इयर्स टू फॉर फिक्सेशन ऑफ एवरेज एक्सपोर्ट।
हाँ सर।
उसके लिए सीए सर्टिफिकेट की रिक्वायरमेंट होती है, बिकॉज दैट इज ए फाइनेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन wherein an independent chartered accountant will certify what have been your export for the last 3 years.
ठीक है सर।
And separately एक certificate होता है which has to be given by a chartered engineer.
हाँ सर।
That is called nexus certificate. The list of capital goods which you have mentioned in the application, so those capital goods are having nexus with the item to be produced and exported by you. तो
सर ये कंटिन्यू है फिर अभी भी कंटिन्यू है अभी भी ये?
हाँ कंटिन्यू दोनों तरह के सर्टिफिकेट देने हैं, चार्टेड इंजीनियर से नेक्सस सर्टिफिकेट और चार्टेड अकाउंटेंट से एवरेज फिक्सेशन का सर्टिफिकेट।
बस यही कंफ्यूजन था सर कि जैसे वो सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेशन का कोई प्रोविजन आया ना इसमें, मतलब सीए सर्टिफिकेट चाहिए ही चाहिए।
हाँ चाहिए, अभी वो ये डिस्पेंस भी नहीं किया है सीए सर्टिफिकेट वाला इसमें ईपीसीजी में एटलीस्ट।
अच्छा, मतलब सेल्फ सर्टिफिकेशन का कुछ भी नहीं है इसमें?
ना राइट, नॉट राइट।
ठीक है।
और सर?
हेलो।
हाँ जी, हाँ बोलिए मैडम।
So for the amnesty scheme, if there is a show cause notice being issued and I have completed the EU obligation, will we be able to opt for this amnesty scheme?
नहीं, if you have completed the export obligation।
हाँ जी, मैंने टाइम पीरियड के अंदर ही कंप्लीट कर दिया।
नहीं तो फिर आपको एमनेस्टी किस लिए चाहिए जब आपने एक्सपोर्ट ऑब्लिगेशन ही पूरा कर दिया?
मैंने यूडीसी का एप्लीकेशंस नहीं डाला है सर।
नहीं भी डाला है, अगर
छोड़ दिया लाइसेंस को ऐसे ही।
नहीं दैट इज फाइन, बट इन केस यू हैव कंप्लीटेड द एक्सपोर्ट ऑब्लिगेशन, आपने एक्सपोर्ट पूरा कर दिया, पैसे पूरे रियलाइज हो गए हैं, तो फॉर व्हाट एमनेस्टी इज रिक्वायर्ड? एमनेस्टी is relevant.
I had received one show cause notice from the DGFT saying that I'm yet to complete the obligation and have not submitted the EU DCs.
Many times what happens a number of exporters, so they do not file the paper with the DGFT office for getting the EODC. Even after their validity has expired. So in those cases, they at the end of the day, they issue the notice that you have not issued filed any paper pertaining to the EODC of the license. But once you file, you can show, okay, there may be some late, but I have fulfilled the export obligation in quantity terms, in value terms, so then they will regularize it. So this sort of situation will, in case you are saying that there is shortfall in export, so then you can go by the amnesty scheme. But in case there is no shortfall, so you are not per se covered under the amnesty scheme itself.
Okay, sir. Yeah, thank you.
मैं क्वेश्चन पूछूं?
हाँ बोलिए सर, हाँ बोलिए।
जैसे EPCG में थर्ड पार्टी और स्टेट लाइसेंस होल्डर के बीच में एग्रीमेंट चाहिए होता था, जो अब शायद हटा दिया गया है।
राइट राइट।
उसके बारे में थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन कर पाएंगे कि क्या मतलब कि वो हटा दिया गया, मतलब एग्रीमेंट चाहिए ही नहीं है या फिर डिक्लेरेशन देना, उसके लिए क्या करना?
नहीं, वो इसलिए हटा दिया वो क्योंकि वो टोटली अदरवाइज इररिलेवेंट था, उसका कोई मीनिंग नहीं था कि कोई रीजन भी कि थर्ड पार्टी एक्सपोर्ट क्या था कि मान लीजिए कि मैं EPCG लाइसेंस होल्डर हूँ, मैंने आई हैव इंपोर्टेड द कैपिटल गुड्स, आई हैव मैन्युफैक्चर्ड द प्रोडक्ट, मैंने इंस्टेड ऑफ हेलो
आवाज आ रही आवाज
आ रही है
who are not asking the question.
हेलो
actually I am asking question, so please don't unmute, don't mute.
हाँ यस सर,
हाँ सर बोलिए।
हाँ मैं वही कह रहा हूँ कि अगर आई एम EPCG लाइसेंस होल्डर, आई हैव मैन्युफैक्चर्ड द गुड्स and I have sold this said goods to you, you are a third party and you are exporting them. So otherwise, even in the absence of any sort of agreement between you and me, so that arrangement is covered under the other so many documents, because I will be selling those goods on the strength of a GST invoice on which the GST is paid, there will be a e-way challan, there will be other document, you will be making the payment to me, the payment, so all other collateral evidence is there, and you must be maybe purchase order, may not be purchase. So there any sort of typical type of agreement was unnecessary and was not required, and that is why they have dispensed it. इसमें कोई बहुत बड़ी change नहीं है, it was irrelevant. That's what I'm saying.
Okay sir.
Excuse me sir.
Yeah, ठीक है बोलिए।
We are the AU certified.
Hello.
हाँ जी बोलिए।
Hello.
एक एक करके सर।
Sir, we are
मैडम बोलने दीजिए। Yes sir.
Sir, we are the AU certified company.
Hello.
Yes मैडम बोलने दीजिए। Yes हाँ।
Sir, we are the AU certified company. And we are using the deferred duty benefit through the AO program. So we want to know that the ECL when it will be the auto deduct.
Okay.
Like, payment benefit. So it will be auto debit, then when it will be deduct in the AO program.
नहीं आपका क्वेश्चन बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है। इनफैक्ट हमने भी इसको इतना माइन्यूटली नहीं एनालाइज किया। अभी उन्होंने इससे रिलेटेड रेगुलेशन इशू करने हैं, रूल्स इशू करने हैं, क्योंकि अगर आपने इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कैश लेजर का बेनिफिट ले लिया, उस वॉलेट के अंदर पैसा जमा करा दिया और अभी आप 15 दिन का एज एन एईओ डेफर्ड पेमेंट का बेनिफिट ले रहे हैं तो वो बेनिफिट आपको कैसे मिलेगा? अगर ऑटो डिडक्ट होना है तो देन दैट बेनिफिट विल गो। दैट इज व्हाट यू आर सेइंग।
मैडम इसमें ना ये ऑटो डिडक्शन वाला फैसिलिटी भी आपको तब मतलब ये तब होगा जब आप इसके लिए कंसेंट देंगे, आपको डिक्लेरेशन भी देनी होगी और कंसेंट भी देनी होगी। सो आई वुड सजेस्ट कि अगर आप एयू हैं तो मे बी दैट इज द वे एंड मैकेनिज्म कि उस केसेस में आप ये ऑटो डेबिट वाली फैसिलिटी ले ही ना।
ओके मैम।
अब बाकी रेगुलर इससे रिलेटेड डिटेल्ड रूल और सर्कुलर आएंगे तो परहैप्स वी विल बी इन अ बेटर पोजीशन टू एक्सप्लेन इट इन अ बेटर मैनर।
ओके सर।
हाँ सर। हेलो।
हाँ जी बोलिए सर।
would be the last question sir.
Hello.
हाँ बोलिए सर।
Amnesty scheme. Is there any rationale why the advance authorization issued after 31st March 15 as are being excluded?
वो क्योंकि उसमें फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल बाय डिफॉल्ट द concept of interest payment equal to the duty amount, first of all that will not fit into that sort of picture. क्योंकि नाउ इन्होंने क्या किया कि सपोज योर लाइसेंस हैव बीन इशूड इन 2011, 2012, नाउ वी आर रनिंग इनटू 2013. तो 12-13 साल में इंटरेस्ट अमाउंट इटसेल्फ will become 150%. It will be capped to 100%. So there you will be getting the benefit. In case you have issued the license say in 2017, now we are in 2023. तो 6 साल में तो आपका इंटरेस्ट कंपोनेंट बाय डिफॉल्ट 100% से कम रहेगा.
But still, at the if we consider rate of interest at 18%, if the default is in 2017, for 6 years, the interest amount will be will be more than 100%.
एक तो मैं थोड़ा सा आपको करेक्ट कर दूं, ये एक बहुत बड़ी मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग है कि बहुत सारे लोगों में ट्रेड में, इंडस्ट्री में, कंसल्टेंट्स में कि रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट इज 18%. ये 18% जो रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट है, ये सेक्शन 28 ऑफ कस्टम एक्ट में कि वेयर द ड्यूटीज आर नॉट वेड, शॉर्ट वेड एटसेट्रा, वहां पे लागू होता है. जितनी भी एक्सपोर्ट प्रमोशन स्कीम्स हैं, वेयर यू हैव डिफॉल्टेड, वेदर इट इज एडवांस लाइसेंस, EPCG, EOU, यहाँ पे रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट 15% लगता है, 15%, और सिंपल इंटरेस्ट लगता है. वो ये 18 नहीं लगता है. बहुत सारे गलत वे कर रहे हैं और गलत अंडरस्टैंडिंग रखते हैं इसके बारे में. ओके. और ये जो है ना, ये क्योंकि ये सेल्फ कंटेन्ड नोटिफिकेशन है, नोटिफिकेशन कोई अगर आप डिटेल में देखेंगे ना कि वेदर इट इज एडवांस लाइसेंस रिलेटेड नोटिफिकेशन और EPCG, तो नोटिफिकेशन के अंदर ही दे रखा है कि यू विल बी इन केस ऑफ failure to fulfill the export obligation, interest at the rate of 15% will be charged.
Okay, thank you.
सही. ओके
सर,
बाकी के ना मैं ये रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि कुछ क्वेश्चन है ना जिसके भी हैं, मोस्ट वेलकम, लेकिन उनको ये हमारे मैसेज ईमेल में डाल दीजिएगा. So we will certainly respond to that because today time is over. हाँ ये सर. सुवेदा.
Thank you very much, everybody, for being patient listeners and having a good interactive session towards the end. We actually enjoyed very much interacting with you. I hope the same for you and that it has been a very knowledgeable session also. We would welcome your questions. You can drop your questions on the email IDs indicated here in the PPT, and we will be glad to answer them. I am ending the session as of now. Thank you very much.